millionaire CEO, avoided all women for 30 years until one intern walked in and he fell instantly. He built his world from silence. No perfume, no laughter, no warmth. They said he was allergic to women. But maybe he was just allergic to being hurt again. Then she showed up, loud, uninvited, and desperate enough to lie her way into his life. She didn't mean to change him. She only meant to survive. But sometimes, love doesn't ask permission. He just walks into your life wearing knockoff sneakers and a broken heart. And suddenly, even a man who couldn't be touched is unbent. Aren't you gonna say, where no one ever stayed? They said Grayson Whitest Stone couldn't be touched. Literally. Doctors called it psychosomatic contact hypersensitivity, a rare, trauma-based condition triggered by physical contact, especially with women. But boardrooms didn't care about childhood diagnoses. Investors only wanted results. So he gave them results. Clean, flawless, surgical. In 30 years, no woman had lasted longer than a handshake. Even his assistants wore gloves. Even his mother didn't hug him goodbye. Now, at 32, Grayson was a billionaire, a recluse, and, thanks to his southern grandmother, a bachelor under siege. "I want to see you married," Evelyn Whitest Stone said gently, holding her oxygen tube like it was part of her prayer. "Before I die?" He didn't roll his eyes, not when she said things like that. Instead, he offered the only compromise he could handle, a fake girlfriend, just someone to smile at holiday dinners and nod politely beside him at charity galas. Nothing real, nothing physical. Just presence. Even numbers. Even lives. He posted the role under a fake title, Executive Relations Officer. Vague enough to scare off the curious, clear enough to attract the ambitious. That morning, 5 women came. None made it past the white gloves and sterile stare. Until her. Jessa Carter hadn't meant to walk into. She'd been rushing from her side hustle at a cosmetics counter, holding a half-eaten protein bar in her mouth while changing into a second-hand blazer. The security guard gave her the wrong floor, the elevator buttons stuck, and by the time she landed in Grayson's office, she was 15 minutes late and already muttering apologies under her breath. She didn't know this was a girlfriend interview, and she thought it was a media role. So when he asked, "What do you want from a relationship?" her answer was immediate. "Nothing. I like because I like. I don't expect people to save me." He blinked. It was the first time a woman hadn't tried to negotiate. He leaned forward slightly, curious in a way that unnerved him. He thought he was weird. He thought she was chaos wrapped in nerves and neon sneakers. Neither realized that one of them was lying. And the other was about to fall. He hired her on the spot. $50,000 a month, 24/7 availability, no physical contact, follow his routine, smile in front of grandma, no questions asked. She signed. He watched her name curve across the page, noting the tremble in her wrist. "What's your reason?" he asked, just once. She looked at the contract, at the number beside it, at the call she'd ignored earlier from the hospital billing department. "She needs surgery," Jessa whispered, "and I'm out of time." He said nothing. He just folded the paper. And for the first time in years, Grayson Whitest Stone invited someone into his life without gloves. In the days that followed, the mansion changed. Not on the outside, no one dared move the paintings or rearrange the floor to save windows. But in the air. There was humming in the kitchen. Half-empty coffee mugs on the stairs. Lip gloss on the guest bathroom mirror. She didn't tiptoe. She tripped. She burned toast. She spoke too loudly. She asked why he only wore navy. She snuck chocolate into the pristine fridge. She challenged his even number rule. She made him laugh once, and it terrified him so much he left the room. "Are you scared of women?" she teased. "Or just scared of feeling anything?" He didn't answer. Because he didn't know anymore. And then Grandma came over. It changed everything. Evelyn, frail but fiery, took one look at Jessa and beamed. "I see it. You're the one who ruined his perfect little world." "That's not what this is," Grayson tried to insist. "Good," Grandma said, "because if it were, it'd already be broken." She insisted on a dinner, then engagement photos, then matching pajamas. Grayson watched as Jessa stood in the garden, laughing in the sunlight, and something in him cracked. The lie was beginning to feel real. Olivia's eyes welled up, and that terrified him more than any allergy ever could. Chapter 1. Allergic to women. They used to call it a disease. Something rare, clinical, clean. Doctors labeled it psychosomatic contact hypersensitivity, as if a fancy diagnosis could explain why Grayson Whitest Stone flinched at the brush of a hand or recoiled from warmth. But the truth was simpler. Grayson wasn't allergic to women. He was allergic to being needed, to being touched in ways that left marks invisible to the naked eye, to the kind of closeness that made people stay, just long enough to hurt you when they didn't. And so he built a fortress. Not with walls or moats, but with silence, structure, and the kind of cold that made people forget he was still breathing beneath the suit. Every morning at 6:04 a.m. exactly, Grayson woke up. Not a minute early, not a second late. His penthouse in downtown Seattle overlooked the sound, but the blinds stayed closed. He drank the same black coffee in even sips, read the stock reports, had walked the same 10 steps from window to desk, desk to treadmill, treadmill to shower. Even numbers only. No perfume, no fabric softeners, no bright colors, no hugs. His assistants cycled in and out like calendar reminders, never lasting more than 2 months. Because eventually, they all made the same mistake. They cared. "Grayson," she called again, said Liam, his assistant of 31 days. "Your grandmother, she said it's urgent." "She says that every week. Mention your inheritance this time." That earned a glance. "She's threatening to give it to the cat sanctuary if you don't bring a date to Easter dinner." Grayson sighed. "Then the cats win." "Sir." He's bluffing. "She hired a matchmaker." That made him stop. "I'm flying to Seattle next week. She wants to meet your special someone." Grayson exhaled slowly. There it was again, that word. Someone. The one thing his life had no room for. The next morning, he made the call. Set up interviews, he told HR. "My what position?" Companionship, temporary partner for public appearances. Terms negotiable?" "You mean, like a fake girlfriend?" "Like a controlled narrative." He sent the terms. The lawyers signed off. 5 women were selected. High profile, media savvy, all approved by his PR team. And every single one of them left within the hour. Too touchy, too needy, too fake. Grayson was starting to regret the whole idea, until the 6th one walked in, and she wasn't on the list. She wasn't even dressed for an interview. In fact, she was winded, running in late, with one heel broken, a resume smudged with lipstick, and the kind of expression that said, "Hi, sorry, are you the hiring manager?" she blurted. "I'm here for the junior marketing assistant role. I know I'm late, but I swear it's not my fault." "You're number 6? Grayson asked sharply, eyeing the name tag she clearly borrowed from her. She blinked. "Number 6? Yes." He tilted his head. "Just it? You came for an interview. You're here now. Might as well earn the air." She hesitated, then shrugged. "Okay, weird man with perfect posture, let's do this." He ran through the questions robotically. Name, Jessa. Age, old enough to know better, young enough to still mess it up. The qualifications. Survival. Side hustles. I can sell lip gloss to lumberjacks. He arched a brow. "What do you want from a relationship?" She paused. "Well, it's part of the role," he said, careful not to clarify. Her answer came without thinking. "Nothing," she said. "I don't want anything from people anymore. If I love, I love. That's it." Grayson looked up. Her tone wasn't defensive. It was honest, raw, completely unexpected. He leaned forward. You have no expectations? No. You're not afraid of getting nothing in return? Better than getting used. He studied her carefully. There was a tremble in her hands, not from fear, but from holding too much and refusing to drop any of it. You're hired, he said flatly. Wait, what? He stood. Starting tomorrow. You'll move into the Bellevue estate. Terms are outlined here. You'll be compensated monthly. Jessa stared. What kind of marketing assistant needs to move into a mansion? Grayson didn't blink. You're not a marketing assistant. Then he handed her the contract. Unflexible agreement. Subject will act as the personal companion of Mr. Whitestone for family events, social obligations, and designated company appearances. Subject agrees to live soberly during the duration of the agreement. No physical intimacy is required. Relationship must appear sincere. Payment: $50,000, 0 cent/month. Violation of terms results in immediate termination and forfeiture of payment. Jessa froze. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. The bills are overdue, sweetheart. I don't know what to do anymore. This is insane, she whispered. You want to fake date me? I want silence, symmetry, stability. I'm not any of those things. She walked in anyway. She looked at the numbers. $50,000. Just enough to buy her mom time. Maybe enough to keep the lights on. Maybe even enough to stop running. She closed her eyes and signed. That night, as Grayson locked the contract away in a drawer of his perfectly symmetrical desk, he didn't realize he'd just done something unthinkable. He'd invited a stranger into his life. A woman who didn't follow rules, didn't whisper, didn't walk on eggshells. And somewhere deep in his perfectly timed chest, a clock he didn't know existed began to. Chapter 2: 50,000 Reasons. Jessa Carter didn't believe in fairy tales, not after the eviction notice, not after the overdraft texts, and definitely not after hearing her mom's breathing through the hospital landline, thin and shaky. But $50,000 a month? That wasn't a fairy tale. That was survival. That was the price of oxygen tanks, co-pays, and a doctor's promise that it's treatable if we act now. So when the town car arrived the next morning, sleek, black, with tinted windows, and a man in gloves who didn't smile, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed her thrifted duffel bag, kissed her mom's forehead in the clinic room, and whispered, "I'll come back with a miracle." The drive from Tacoma to Bellevue felt like entering another world. Where Jessa came from, windows rattled in their frames. Where Grayson Whitestone lived, glass wrapped the sky and reflected the rain like poetry. His estate was a fortress of order. White stone, navy shutters, hedges trimmed to exact symmetry. She barely stepped out before a voice greeted her. "You're late." He stood on the front steps, dressed in a charcoal sweater, sleeves pushed up, watch perfectly centered on his wrist. She looked at her phone. "It's 8:02. You said you'd arrive at 7:50. No, your assistant said traffic was factored in. Also, chill." He didn't blink. Instead, he turned and walked inside. The house was too quiet. Not the cozy kind, the museum kind. No ticking clocks, no family photos, no smells. It felt like a place where no one lived, only operated. Grayson handed her a folder. Her first assignment. She opened it. On page 1, Mr. White's daily routine. Page 2, trigger list. Page 3, conversation topics permitted in front of Grandma Evelyn. "Wait," she said, flipping. "This is a script? Framework. It's a robot instruction manual." He sat, legs crossed, back straight. "I need someone who can fit the role. Precisely. My grandmother is sharp. If she suspects anything..." "You'll what? Fire me? Rip the contract?" His gaze darkened. "No, but you'll forfeit everything." That night, Jessa moved into the guest room. No one said welcome. No one offered tea. She unpacked beside a mahogany dresser she'd never afford, slipped on socks that didn't match, and stared at the ceiling, wondering if she'd just sold her soul. But then her phone buzzed. They moved me to a better bed. You didn't say how, but thank you, baby. Jessa smiled through the tears. 50,000 reasons, she whispered, and every one of them is for you. The next day began with chaos. Not Grayson's, hers. She burned the eggs, accidentally used his cologne as countertop spray, tried to open the front door barefoot, a violation on page 6. You live here now, he said coldly, intercepting her. Try to act like it. You mean like a mannequin? Like a professional? Honey, I thought I was hired to fake love you, not fetch mail in silence. He looked at her like he wasn't sure if she was a virus or a glitch. You talk too much and feel too little. Neither realized it yet, but they were beginning to unravel each other. That afternoon, Evelyn Whitestone arrived. The rain paused just long enough for her cane to click on the marble steps. Jessa, was it? She said, smiling warmly. Jessie took her hand instinctively. Grayson winced, but nothing happened. No flare-up, no retreat, no gloves. Just a grandmother's fingers curled into Jessa's like they'd done it before. Ma'am, Jessa said, it's an honor. I don't want your honor. I want you to wreck this cold boy's routine. Grayson opened his mouth, closed it. I'm right here, Grandma. I know. That's why I'm talking louder. Jessa smiled, and something in her chest loosened. For the first time in a long time. Later that night, she found him in the study. He was reading, alone, surrounded by books with spines that looked unopened. Hey, she said, leaning on the doorframe. He looked up. I just wanted to say thanks for, this. He said nothing. Also, this whole controlling, emotionally constipated thing you do? Until nothing. It's exhausting. Finally, he spoke. You're a hurricane in sneakers. She grinned. You're a walking spreadsheet. They stared at each other a moment longer than necessary. She should have turned away. But she didn't. She said quietly, not all touch hurts. His eyes softened, but his hands stayed still.
That night, Jessa dreamed of her mother laughing again. Grayson dreamed of warmth that didn't burn. Neither of them realized it yet. But the rules were starting to bend. In love was already finding its way in between the silence, the sarcasm, and the signatures.
Chapter 3. Moving in with ice. Jessa Carter never thought moving into a mansion would feel like moving into a freezer. But that's exactly what it was. Cold, violent, and stocked with rules no one explained until after she broke them. The day began with a knock at her bedroom door. Not a tap, not a good morning. A calculated knock, 2 short, even numbers, always even. She opened the door, still in pajama pants and a hoodie that had seen better days. Grayson stood there in a perfectly pressed navy sweater, holding a clipboard. You're 6 minutes behind schedule, he said flatly. Nice to see you too, Grayson. Sleep okay in your cryo chamber? He blinked. She yawned. He handed her a folder. Your revised routine. Breakfast is at 7:08. We leave at 7:44. Grandma expects you at the Whitestone family brunch. No visible tattoos, minimal scent, flat shoes, neutral palette. You're representing me now. She took the folder and muttered, if I'd known selling my soul came with brand guidelines, I would have demanded hazard pay. He turned and walked away. But she swore for half a second she saw the corner of his mouth twitch, almost like a smile. By 7:44, they were on the road. In silence. Jessa kept glancing his way, watching the way his jaw tightened every time she tapped her fingers on the leather console. The man was allergic to unpredictability. She could almost feel him counting her exhales. "So," she said, just to break the tension, "what's the story with you and even numbers? Childhood trauma involving odd socks?" He didn't look at her. "It's a coping system. For chaos." "Sounds exhausting." "It's survival." She nodded, quietly this time. Maybe it wasn't about numbers. Maybe it was about control. About the kind of loss you can't explain, so you start measuring everything just to keep something from slipping. The Whitestone brunch was an event straight out of a lifestyle magazine. White linen, gold cutlery, garden roses. Women in pearls, men in tailored silence. Grayson barely spoke unless addressed directly. Jessa played her part. She smiled, laughed politely, placed her napkin exactly as the etiquette guide had taught her the night before. But halfway through, Evelyn took her hand under the table and whispered, "Don't you dare become one of them, sweetheart." "Of who?" "The ones who stop laughing just to be accepted." That's when Jessa realized this wasn't a family, it was a performance. And Grayson? He'd been performing so long, he didn't know how to come off stage. Back at the mansion, Jessa found herself wandering. There were 15 rooms, 8 bathrooms, 4 balconies, 2 staircases, but nowhere that felt lived in. No clutter, no books out of place, no warmth, until she found the music room. Hidden behind a paneled door, it smelled faintly of cedar and something old, something forgotten. She stepped inside. At the center stood a grand piano, untouched but open. A faded sheet of music rested on the stand, notes scribbled in the margins. "My mother used to play," came Grayson's voice from behind. She jumped. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "He left when I was 11. "I'm sorry," Jessa said softly. "I'm not." The silence was easier. She didn't say anything, because there was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like a lie. That night she made dinner. Nothing fancy, just mac and cheese from scratch, the way her mom used to. Grayson didn't sit. He stood at the kitchen entrance, watching. "Why is that smell?" "Happiness. Butter. Maybe trauma," she teased. He didn't laugh. But he didn't leave either. She set 2 bowls on the island. "Sit, robot man. You won't melt." He hesitated, then, surprisingly, he did. They ate in silence for a few minutes, until he said, "My housekeeper's allergic to dairy." "I'm not your housekeeper. You're also not my girlfriend." "Yet," she smirked. "Give it a week?" He looked at her then, really looked. And for the first time, he didn't look away. That night, she passed his office on the way to her room. The door was cracked. Inside, he was reading again, a thick book, margin-filled, worn. She lingered. He sensed her. "You don't have to knock." Checking if you short-circuited from carbs. He looked down, then smiled. A real one. She stepped in, sat across from him on the floor. "Do you ever wonder what it'd be like," she asked, "if your life wasn't perfect?" He stared at her. "This isn't perfect." "Then what is it?" "Safe." She nodded, pulled her knees up to her chest. "My life's never been safe. Maybe that's why you showed up here," he said, "to remind me what the world actually feels like." They sat in silence. Not the cold kind. The kind that made space for breath. For maybe. For beginnings. Later, she returned to her room and found something on her pillow. A note, handwritten, "Tomorrow wear something blue. Grandma says it brings out your fire." No signature. Just even lines. And something in her chest that wouldn't settle. Maybe she wasn't just moving in with ice. Maybe she was melting it. Chapter 4. Even numbers only. In Grayson Whitestone's world, everything came in pairs. 2 toothbrushes in the cabinet, though he only used one. 2 alarm clocks, ticking one beat behind the other. 2 spoons in the drawer, perfectly aligned. 2 hearts in one house, beating in different directions. Jessa learned the rules fast. The thermostat had to stay at 72. The pillows fluffed twice, curtains drawn by 6:00 p.m. He wouldn't touch handrails, wouldn't cross thresholds first. And he never ever said goodnight. "Why not?" she asked once. "Because it implies closure," he replied, "and most people don't mean it." But that didn't stop her from saying it every night, just loud enough to be heard through the walls. "Good night, Grayson," she'd whisper. And in the quiet, she'd imagine him whispering it back. They were getting used to each other now, in that messy, awkward way strangers learn to orbit. She stopped asking why he sanitized the remote. He stopped flinching when her laughter echoed too loud. One morning, he brought her tea instead of coffee, without asking. Another night, she left him a playlist on the piano, jazz and old movie themes. Neither spoke of it. But the distance between them was shrinking. In the most dangerous way. Came the charity gala. The first public appearance. The first test. Jessa stood at the top of the marble staircase, wearing a navy dress chosen by Grayson's stylist, sleek, safe, silent. "I feel like a lawyer's shadow," she muttered. Grayson looked up at her from the bottom of... He didn't say anything. He just stared, long enough to make her shift. "Why?" she said. "It fits?" And she rolled her eyes. But her chest ached a little at the way he said it. Like she belonged. They arrived at the gala in silence. Flashes, cameras, handshakes. To Grayson was steel. Jessa was sunlight forced into shadow. She smiled, played her part. But halfway through the evening, she whispered in his ear. "You look like you're being held hostage." "I am." "By what?" "Expectation." She laughed. He didn't. "What?" "Let's get out of here," she said. "We can't." "Why not?" "Because I don't leave things undone." "Then consider this complete." She grabbed his hand the first time and pulled him outside. They ended up at a gas station. She made him pump gas for the first time in a decade. Bought 2 cherry slushies. They sat on the hood of the Bentley, staring at the night sky. She said, "Tell me something real." He sipped his drink. "I hate storms." "Why?" "Because they remind me of what I can't control." She looked at him. "I grew up inside one." He turned his head. "What do you mean?" "My dad left when I was 10. My mom had cancer by 12. I learned to make toast in a motel microwave and apply to scholarships while holding her chemo bag." "That's not a storm," he said softly. "What is it then?" "A miracle." She went quiet, and then nudged his shoulder. "Even number of sips, Whitest Stone. Don't mess it up." Later that night, she found a sticky note on her mirror. "And cherry slushies, 2. Laughs, 4. Touches, 1. You owe me 3 more." She pressed her forehead to the glass and smiled. He was tracking her now. Maybe not with his heart, but with numbers. And maybe that was a start. The next morning, Evelyn called. The results were back. The treatments were failing. Jessa overheard the call, standing just outside the study. She wasn't supposed to be there. But Grayson didn't send her away. Instead, he just sat there, back rigid, hands white-knuckled, while Evelyn's voice cracked through the speaker. "You'll be fine, Grandma. If I don't see you married. We're working on it. I want to see her walk into this family in white, Grayson, not in borrowed silence." He didn't answer. After the call ended, he didn't look at Jessa. But he said quietly, "We'll hold the ceremony next." Her breath caught. "It's what she wants." "You want to fake marry me now?" "It's in the contract, under reasonable conditions for deception." She stepped back. You think this is still just deception? He looked up, and for a second, she saw it. The flicker. The fear. The feeling. Don't confuse need with want, Jessa. Maybe I do, but I know the difference between cold and empty. And she turned and walked away. And he let her. Because even-number hearts break evenly too. The next day, she didn't say goodnight. And for the first time, he stood in the hallway waiting. But her door stayed closed. Even numbers. Even pain. Even silence. Chapter 5. The day he let her in. Grayson didn't sleep that night. He didn't toss or turn, his body was still. But his mind? It unraveled thread by thread every time he stared at her closed bedroom door. Jessa hadn't said goodnight. And that shouldn't have mattered. But it did. By morning, the order of his day was already broken. He stepped into the kitchen at exactly 6:30 a.m. to find her not just awake, but baking. Baking. Wearing an apron 2 sizes too big, her hair tied up in a messy bun, flour on her nose. She didn't look up. Didn't speak. The air between them was thick with everything unsaid. "You're up early?" he offered. Still, no answer. He cleared his throat. "I rearranged the wedding schedule. Evelyn prefers next Friday. You'll have time to..." "It's not a wedding." She finally looked at him. "It's a performance." He swallowed hard. "Olivia wants more." "What do you want?" He didn't answer. And this time, she didn't wait. The silence stretched all day. He spent it locked in meetings, obsessively rechecking numbers that didn't matter. She spent it packing a single suitcase, not because she planned to leave, but because she needed to feel like she could. Freedom isn't leaving. It's knowing you can. That night, the power went out. A rare storm surged through Bellevue, thunder cracking like glass. Grayson hated storms. He didn't just say that once, he meant it. When the house went dark, he didn't move for 20 minutes. Until Jessa knocked softly on his door. "You okay?" No answer. She opened it gently. He was sitting on the floor, his back to the wall, arms resting on his knees, like a man trying to hold himself together. Grain. Still nothing. So she did something dangerous. Something reckless. Something real. She sat beside him, in silence. Not to fix, not to rescue, just to be there. Minutes passed. Then he spoke. "My mom left during a thunderstorm." Her head turned. "I was 11. I was waiting for her to come home. She never did. She left a note in the piano." He exhaled. "She didn't die. She just chose not to come back." Jessa listened. "I counted the days she was gone. Even numbers felt safer, less lonely." She reached out gently, resting her hand over his. He flinched, but didn't pull away. "I'm not here to leave," she said. "Everyone leaves. Maybe I don't." He finally looked at her. "Although now, because I see the way you fight silence, even when you live in it." The storm raged on. But in that room, something softer began to rise. She curled beside him, head on his shoulder, and for the first time in his adult life, Grayson Whitest Stone didn't feel allergic to closeness. He felt allergic to the idea of her not being there. When the lights returned, he didn't move. Didn't break the moment. Just whispered. "Why, how long?" she asked. "As long as it takes to stop pretending." That night, he made 2 mugs of cocoa, even amounts of sugar, no cinnamon. She added her own. They stood side by side, not speaking. But their silence was different now. Not cold. Not calculating. Just real. Like hands pressed to glass, waiting for the other to reach back. At midnight, as she turned to leave, he caught her wrist. Jessa. Oh, she looked at him. He stepped closer. His breath was uneven, his eyes raw. Then pack again. Then stop pushing me away. He nodded. Deal. She smiled faintly. Even number of promises? Always. That was the day he let her in. Not just into his house, but into the one room he never opened. His heart. And for the first time, it didn't feel like breaking a rule. It felt like finding home. Chapter 6. Something borrowed, something real. Jessa never believed in weddings. She'd seen enough broken ones to understand the ceremony wasn't the miracle, it was just the theater. The script, the sparkle people wore to cover what they couldn't fix. But this one? This wedding? It was something else entirely. Because it wasn't just fake. It was dangerous. Because she was starting to wish it weren't. Grayson didn't touch her dress. Didn't pick the flowers. Didn't practice his vows. But he watched her. Every day. Watched the way she hummed while tying her shoes. The way she sat on the floor to read instead of using the plush chairs no one ever touched. The way she lingered too long near the piano, as if hoping it would remember a song that never came. He told himself it was still a contract. But every time she smiled like she didn't want anything from him, his hands ached to hold something real. The wedding was set for Friday. A private rooftop at Whitestone Tower. Just Evelyn, a few distant board members, and the city lights as their witnesses. Jessa stood in front of a mirror in a borrowed gown, sleeves too long, waist too tight, breathing like she might shatter the glass. You okay? Her friend Anne asked, zipping her up. I'm marrying a man who flinched when I touched his coffee mug last week. Anne shrugged. Sounds romantic. It's pretend. Sorry, most marriages. At least yours pays well. Jessa rolled her eyes, but something inside her curled. Because lately, it didn't feel like pretending. Grayson stood at the edge of the rooftop, staring at the skyline. He hated attention. But when Jessa stepped out, the wind catching her hair, his breath caught in his chest. Not because she looked beautiful, though she did, but because, for the first time in years, he wanted to remember something. Everything. Hey, she whispered when she reached him. Still breathing? Barely. They faced Evelyn. Her eyes gleamed with tears and pride. We'll do it, she said. Before I start crying and ruin the photos. The officiant began. Jessa tried to focus, but every word felt like a thread tightening in her ribs. She kept waiting for Grayson to flinch, to pull away, to remind everyone it was just an act. But he didn't. He looked her in the eyes, held her hand gently, with no gloves. And when the moment came to say I do, he didn't hesitate. The applause was quiet. The kiss was almost non-existent. But the moment was thunderous in her chest. Afterward, Evelyn pulled her aside. It's changing, you know. It's just temporary, Jessa said softly. Nothing real ever is. She hugged Jessa, then the kind of hug that feels like permission. And Jessa, despite every instinct, hugged her back. That night, the house felt different. It wasn't just cleaner, it was warmer. She walked through the halls barefoot. He watched from the top of the stairs, heart pounding like a man waking from a long sleep. I should sleep in the guest room tonight. He nodded, and shook his head. You can stay? You sure? You're my wife. She smiled. Fake wife. He didn't answer. And when she passed him to go upstairs, he whispered. Real enough. And she slept in his bed that night. They didn't touch. But they didn't need to, because the space between them was no longer hollow. It was full. Of breath. Of maybes. Of if-onlys. At 3 a.m., she woke up to find him watching her.
Eyes tired, soft. Did I snore? No, he said. You smiled in your sleep. So, no one does that here. She blinked. Well, now someone does. He reached out, just barely, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Good night, Jessa. Her throat tightened, as it was the first time he'd said it. Good night, Grayson. And somewhere deep inside her, something whispered, please don't let this be borrowed. Let this be the start of something real.
Chapter 7. When the lie becomes the truth. In stories, the turning point is usually loud a slam of the door, a raised voice, a confession shouted under the rain. But sometimes, truth slipped in quietly. Like steam through a crack. Like the space between two hands that never meant to touch, but do. Jessa didn't mean to fall in love with Grayson Whitest Stone. But she meant to act. To survive. To fake it so well that even Evelyn would believe it. But here she was, doing his laundry at midnight, folding his sweaters with trembling hands, because she wanted him to be warm. Because she wanted him to be okay. Even when she wasn't. Grayson wasn't supposed to care. He'd spent 30 years teaching his body not to feel, to retreat at contact, to recoil from anything with a heartbeat. But when Jessa laughed in the kitchen barefoot, burning toast, humming Sinatra, his whole chest felt like it was on fire. Not allergic. To lie. The morning after their fake wedding, she found him in the sunroom. Angry. Not a spreadsheet, not a report. But a poem. He didn't hear her at first. But when he did, he looked up, eyes soft, unguarded. I didn't know you read poetry, she said. I didn't. Until you. She blinked. He cleared his throat, as if embarrassed. You left a copy of Neruda on the piano. You read it? Only the parts you underlined. Her heart stuttered. She didn't remember underlining anything. But he remembered. Every word. That night, she fell asleep in his arms. Not because she had to, but because she didn't want to be anywhere else. She listened to the sound of his breathing, steady now, no longer guarded. And for the first time since she arrived, she felt safe. Not from the world, but from herself, from the part of her that always left first before she could be left. Then came the call. Evelyn had collapsed. Grayson's hands shook as he grabbed the keys. Jessa didn't ask. She was already at the door, slipping on her shoes, heart racing. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and fear. Evelyn lay in the bed, tubes in her arm, a ghost of the woman she'd been at the wedding. But her eyes still sparkled when she saw them. You came, she whispered. Of course we did, Jessa said, brushing her hand. You're his heart now. Don't forget that. Grayson turned away. But Jessa stayed. Held her hand. Because that's what you do when love becomes real. You stay. They brought Evelyn home the next day. Hospice was mentioned. Quietly, carefully. Jessa sat by the bedside for hours, reading aloud. Grayson stood in the doorway every night. Watching, not ready to lose her. Not ready to name what he felt for the girl who saved them both. And then, one morning, it happened. Jessa came down to the kitchen to find Grayson sitting at the table. No suit. No watch. No mask. She asked me last night if it was real, he said quietly. Jessa froze. What did you say? I said yes. She stared at him. He looked up. Because it is, Jessa. It became real somewhere between the first cherry slushie and the moment you stopped saying goodnight. Grayson? Don't say it if you don't mean it. He stood, walked toward her. You were supposed to be a contract. You were supposed to be impossible, she whispered. And then finally, he kissed her. Not softly, not politely, but with everything he'd held back since the day she walked in, wearing mismatched socks and sarcasm like armor. After, they didn't speak for a long time. just breathed. He touched her face like it might disappear. She held his hand like it was a vow. That night, Evelyn slept soundly for the first time in days. Jessa curled beside Grayson on the couch, watching the storm outside. And Grayson? Grayson didn't flinch. He held her close and whispered, "Thank you for not leaving." She smiled, kissed his shoulder, and said, "I stayed because I had to, Grayson. I stayed because I love you." The lie wasn't a lie anymore. It had become the truest thing in both of their lives. Chapter 8. The Woman Who Wasn't Her. Grayson had always trusted one thing above all else: control. He controlled the air temperature in every room, the calories in every meal, the number of steps between his bedroom and the boardroom. He even controlled his loneliness. Until her. Jessa Carter, the unplanned variable. The only risk he didn't calculate. And now? He couldn't imagine his life without the chaos she brought. It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of day that feels like any other, until it isn't. Grayson had just finished reviewing a new product pitch when his assistant knocked, hesitating. "There's something you need to see." He handed over a manila folder, freshly delivered. Inside were photos. Dates. A face he recognized, but not quite. This woman isn't who she says she is. At the same time, Jessa stood in the hallway outside Evelyn's room, holding a tray of soup she made from scratch, the kind with cloves and rosemary, just like Evelyn liked. But when she stepped inside, she found Evelyn holding an old photograph. "Do you believe in second chances, sweetheart?" Jessa smiled. "Every day." Evelyn held up the photo. It was of a girl who looked just like her. Only it wasn't her. "It's not me." "No," Evelyn said, voice distant. "That's Jinxie, my old neighbor's granddaughter. You remind me of her." Jessa's smile faltered. Because Jinxie wasn't just a name. It was the lie her sister had used to land her this job, this life, this man. And it was about to fall apart. That night, Grayson came home late. Jessa was waiting in the piano room, hands folded, heart pounding. "You saw the report." He didn't sit, didn't speak, just stared. "I can explain." "You shouldn't have to. It wasn't meant to go this far." "Why, it did." Silence. "I was never supposed to be Jinxie," she whispered. "Then who are you, Jessa?" Her throat closed. She could lie, or she could break. "I love the girl who pretended, because my mom needed surgery, because we had nothing left, because my sister thought pretending to be someone else was the only way to survive. And she lied. I lied, but I didn't fake this, us." He stepped back. "You let me fall for a ghost?" "No," she said, voice cracking. "You fell for someone real. I swear to God, I've never been more myself than when I was pretending to be someone else." He didn't flinch, didn't move. "You were the first person who didn't touch me," he whispered, "and still made me feel something." "Then don't erase it now." He looked at her eyes full of the betrayal he swore he'd never feel again. "You should go," and she packed in silence. The gown still hung on the door. The teacup from their first shared cocoa still sat on the shelf. She didn't take anything, only left a single note on the bed. "I was never Jinxie, but I was always yours." Evelyn cried when she found out. She loved you, Grayson, even when she didn't have to. But he couldn't answer, because the silence he'd lived with for years had returned. Or now? Hold her. Portia. Days passed. When a week, then another, and the house was clean again. Sterile. Perfect. But it no longer felt like a home. Because she had taken the music with her. Then came a knock. Not on the front door, but on the piano lid. He turned. Evelyn stood there, weak but determined. "I'm dying, Grayson. Please don't say that. You think silence will save you from pain, but it's never protected you. It only postponed the heartbreak." Lie. So did I for most of my life, about who I was, what I felt. But I learned this. Sometimes the truest love comes from the biggest mistakes. She placed a photo in his hand. Of Jessa. But not a surveillance photo. A candid one. Smiling, holding Evelyn's hand. She made me feel alive again. Like someone still remembered I was more than a dying name in a hospital bed. "Why if she doesn't forgive me?" Grayson whispered. Evelyn smiled. "And so you beg." Chapter 9. The Girl at the Edge of Everything. Jessa moved back into a walk-up apartment that smelled like rain and regret. No piano. No slushies. It's no even numbers. Just echoes of a man who had learned to breathe again and then chose silence anyway. She got a job at a coffee bar near the hospital, where the espresso was bitter and the customers forgot her name. But she didn't forget his. It's not the way he looked at her across a rooftop in a suit he hated. Not the way he whispered, "Stay," when the storm outside was loud enough to. She remembered everything, and tried every day to forget. Grayson didn't beg. Not right away. At first, he did what he'd always done. Retreated. The company took him back in hard numbers, clean meetings, nothing that bled. But even his employees noticed. He stopped fixing his cufflinks. Stopped correcting the coffee temperature. Stopped remembering to eat. Because everything still tasted like her. It wasn't until Evelyn landed in the ICU that the weight of everything finally cracked. And she was fading faster now. A fall, a seizure, a second stroke. The woman who had once commanded boardrooms now needed help to sip water. And all she kept asking was one name. Jessa. Over and over, as if her life depended on it. That's when he found her. Not with a private investigator, but with his own 2 feet. He walked the streets of Bellevue for hours until he saw her, through the window of a cafe, wiping down tables with a cracked smile and an apron too big for her frame. She didn't see him at first. But he didn't move, didn't breathe. Just watched the girl who had once stood in his storm and told him he didn't have to be afraid. When their eyes met, the world stopped. She didn't run. But she didn't smile either. She walked out onto the sidewalk, wiping her hands on her apron. "Why are you here?" "He's asking for you." Jessa's throat tightened. "His feet?" "We don't know." And paused. "I know I was wrong." "You were hurt?" "I was cruel." I silence. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Her note. "I read it every night," he said. "But because I forgot how to say what you wrote." "I was never jinxy," she whispered. "I was never as cold as I pretended." Evelyn was pale when they arrived. But her smile lit the room when she saw Jessa. "My girl." Jessa took her hand. Grayson stood behind them, silent. "You're still wearing the ring," Evelyn whispered. "I never took it off." "Then don't let it go to waste." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Marry her again, Grayson, this time for real." They didn't plan it, didn't rehearse. There was no tux, no dress, no rooftop skyline. Just a hospital bed, 2 tired hearts, and a nurse who was ordained by accident but believed in fate. Grayson looked at Jessa like she was the only thing he'd never calculated. "I don't need a contract," he said softly. "I just need you." "Even if I'm a mess?" she asked. When he kissed her this time, it wasn't about ceremony. It was about survival. Because some people walk to the edge of everything and don't fall. They fly. Chapter 10. The Other Side of Silence. Bellevue was quiet the morning Evelyn passed. Not the kind of silence that hurts. The kind that holds. like the hush after a song you loved, the stillness between two people who no longer need words. Jessa sat by her bedside, hand in Evelyn's frail one. Grayson stood by the window, jaw clenched, staring at a skyline that suddenly felt too wide. There was no dramatic last breath, no whispered goodbye. Just a deep exhale and peace. The kind Evelyn always hoped they'd find, not just for her, but for each other. They buried her under the maple trees, beside her late husband. Grayson chose the headstone. Jessa chose the flowers. And when the crowd thinned and the sky grayed, they stood there alone, fingers loosely entwined. "She was proud of you," Jessa whispered. That was hard on her. "He loved you anyway." He nodded. "I didn't know how to say goodbye." "You don't have to. She's still here. In every quiet room you walk into, in every time you remember to smile, she's there." His throat caught. "What about us?" Jessa looked up. "I depend." "On what?" "On whether you're still keeping count of even numbers." He smiled, small, but real. "I stopped the day you walked in." They moved back into the house 2 weeks later. Not because they had to, but because it had stopped feeling like a museum and started feeling like a home. Grayson donated the gloves, started eating odd numbers of crackers, replaced silence with jazz. And every Sunday, Jessa lit a candle beside the piano, just for Evelyn. The company changed too. Not drastically, just humanly. Grayson began sitting in on interviews. He smiled more, listened more. He once asked an intern if they were okay when he noticed their hands shaking. The intern nearly fainted. But it wasn't fear. It was shock that someone like him could see someone like them. And then, one spring morning, as tulips bloomed on the balcony, Jessa found a letter under her teacup. No name. Just one sentence, typed in 12-point serif font. "It's your turn to stop pretending." Inside the envelope was a plane ticket. Saddle to Venice, one way. And a note in his handwriting. "You said once that you'd never seen the world. I'd like to change that, but only if you still want to do this together. No lies, just us." They left the next week. Rented a cottage by the Grand Canal. He couldn't stand the gondolas at first. Too uneven, too unpredictable. But she made him laugh until he forgot to be afraid. They got lost in alleyways, ate gelato for breakfast, argued in museums, and made up before dinner. And on their last night, he pulled her close on a quiet bridge and said, "I used to think I was allergic to women." She raised an eyebrow. "And now? I know. I was allergic to being touched by anyone who didn't see me. I'm me." "You saw everything and still stayed." They kissed as the bell tower rang. Even numbers. 12 chimes. Grayson smiled. "One's for you, Evelyn." They came home 2 months later. To the same house. The same piano. Only this time, Jessa played. Badly, off-key. But Grayson sat beside her anyway. Because sometimes, love isn't a perfect song. It's a broken note you still choose to hear every single day. Final reflection, a quiet kind of always. Love doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it walks in on borrowed heels and borrowed names. Sometimes it starts as a contract and ends as a vow no paper could hold. Grayson Whitest Stone spent 30 years hiding behind silent walls, distance, even numbers. He thought he was protecting himself. But all he was doing was waiting. For her. The girl who didn't fit the profile. The intern with the wrong name and the right heart. The woman who didn't ask to be chosen, only to be seen. And in seeing her, he finally saw himself. Not the CEO. Not the heir. Not the broken boy abandoned in a storm. Just a man who loved. Jessa never believed in fairy tales. And she believed in survival, in showing up, in loving with hands that shook, and a heart that had been told too many times it wasn't enough. But Grayson changed that. Not with money, not with promises, but with the one thing she'd never been offered before: room to stay. Sometimes love isn't about fireworks. It's about quiet dinners and slippers. No midnight talks with no makeup and too much honesty. Holding hands at a funeral and laughing in foreign alleyways. It's about staying not because you have to, but because you couldn't imagine being anywhere else. So if you're reading this now, maybe you've known heartbreak. Maybe you've been lied to, left, forgotten. But I hope, I really do, that one day someone walks into your life and chooses to stay. Even when it's messy. Even when it's hard. Even when it means tearing down every wall just to say, I see you, and I'm not going anywhere. If this story touched you, even just a little, share your favorite line in the comment, or tell us, what does real love look like to you? Because sometimes, all it takes is one story, one voice, to remind us that in a world full of pretend, there's still a quiet kind of always. And it still wins. Always.